Welcome to episode 312 of the Ski Podcast, and thanks for joining us, listener. I am your host, Ian Martin, and today is a special episode, the latest in an ongoing series of interviews with high-achieving women in the world of snow sport. Previous episodes in this series have included conversations with Vicky Gosling, CEO of GB Snowsport, BBC Ski Sunday's Chemmy Alcott, the first person to ski the Seven Summits, DesLauriers, founder of YSE Ski, Fiona Easdale, as well as the Team GB freestyle skiers Zoe Atkin and Kirsty Muir. My guest today is no stranger to the Ski Podcast. Long-term listeners will recognise her voice as a regular contributor of all things snow sports down under, most recently giving us Team Australia insights direct from the Winter Olympics in Livigno. She is a best-selling author, publicist, documentary producer, social media guru and podcaster in her own right, but is perhaps best known as the founder of snowsbest.com, the Southern Hemisphere's leading snow sports website. It's always a pleasure to welcome Rachael Oakes-Ash to the podcast. Hi, Rachael. How are you?
Hi, Ian. You make me sound a lot better than I am. I'm pretty impressed that you're at episode 312. That is off the freaking charts. And DesLauriers and Zoe Atkin, hello. Happy to be breathing the same podcast air as those two.
Excellent. And whereabouts are you today, Rachael?
Oh, I'm actually at home. I'm in Australia. I live about an hour and a half south of Sydney in an area called the Southern Highlands, is what they call it. Uh-huh. It's kind of like the Cotswolds of England. A lot of people refer to it as the Hamptons of Sydney, which makes me laugh because there isn't even a beach here. We're actually inland in the country, so I kind of feel like none of them have been to the Hamptons, and they're all real estate agents trying to sell that line anyway. So that's where I am today.
Cool. Well, it's the morning for me. It must be the evening for you. And we're recording this in May. While there has been some early snow, the season in Australia and New Zealand hasn't quite started yet. So a question I always like to ask my guests is, when did you ski or snowboard last? I'm wondering if it was when you were last over here in Europe for the Winter Olympics.
No, I actually snuck off to Whistler for some spring skiing after Livigno. I mean, I'm still on a high. You only have to say, my friends laugh because whenever I go, we're at the Winter Olympics, I have Winter Olympic mention-itis for Livigno, and we have this drinking game. If ever I say Livigno or Winter Olympics, they go, God, we're so drunk already. So I actually snuck off to Whistler, and I have to say, I've been to Whistler a number of times, and I've never really nailed it. And I absolutely, completely and utterly got and understood why people are obsessed by this ski resort. It was incredible snow. I actually got to see everything. I actually went up with a guy who you might know, Derek Foos, who's the voice of the Freeride World Tour. Anyway, I went up to the top of Whistler with him as my guide. And I said, oh, my God, where are we? Oh, that looks like Black Tusk. I'd only ever seen it in a photo. And he was like, Rachael, we're on the top of Whistler. I said, I've never been on the top of Whistler with great visibility, and it frickin' rocks. It's just like, it looks like Europe.
Cool. And you must have timed that fairly well coming towards the end of the season, because I think Canada and in general the Rockies, had a fairly challenging season in terms of snow.
Yeah, they have had a challenging season, but few people actually realise that March is the month where Whistler traditionally gets the most snow. Out of the whole entire season, that's when they get the most snow. So spring is a really, really good time. I'm just going to go to Whistler in spring every single time now going forward.
So you mentioned you've got Winter Olympics-itis, too many mentions of Livigno, but, what an amazing experience that would have been. I wondered if I could just ask you a little bit about that. This was your second Winter Olympics after Pyeongchang in 2018. I wondered, how do they compare?
Well, I first got accreditation for Sochi, couldn't go because I had a very ill mother, and then I got accreditation for Pyeongchang. Then I got accreditation for Beijing, but chose not to go because it was COVID, and that would have just been a disaster, stuck in a bubble and you can't leave. I get very claustrophobic if people try to tell me what to do. So I wasn't going to Beijing. And then, of course, Livigno. The two are incomparable. You could not compare the two. You really couldn't. It was so wonderful to be in a village with history that is a ski village first and foremost, really, a mountain village first and foremost, and for the Winter Olympics to be on around you. And I feel like it was the first time since 2010, when it was last at Whistler, that it really was a core ski destination, if that makes sense. And I feel that's what's going to happen in France in the next 4 years as well.
Certainly, you referred to Beijing there. From my experience of having talked to different athletes who went there and some of the journalists who were there, you definitely made the right decision, because it seemed quite intimidating, very difficult. The constant fear of testing positive certainly affected a lot of the athletes. So that was a good one to skip. You mentioned that Livigno, is a traditional ski resort village. I think one of the other advantages from talking to people who were there was that it was very compact. The events in Milano Cortina took place in lots of different areas, Livigno being the freestyle area, but it was all compact. You could get everywhere very easily.
Yeah, you could walk. I mean, I was doing 20,000 steps a day and not even realizing it. I couldn't figure out why I was eating so much and obviously praying so much, because Europe, you're supposed to do that, right? And not putting on weight. And then I looked out on my health app on my phone and went, oh my God, we're doing like 20,000 steps a day, just incidentally walking from venue to venue, from press center to press center. It was compact and easy to get around if you were prepared to walk.
Another difference from other Winter Olympic Games that we've had recently is that a lot of those were held almost exclusively on artificial snow. And while there were some concerns in the lead up to the Games, actually the snow hit around the same time as the Games started. Was that a problem for athletes and for you in the media?
I think it was a problem for athletes in park and pipe, because, you want to be on hard packed snow. And when the powder storm came through, that created visibility issues and also snow quality issues. Obviously, great snow for us to ski on, your leisure skier, but not necessarily for athletes that are coming from hard-packed ice half pipes into half pipes that have now got, chalky snow on top of it. Now, the guys did an incredible job. But yeah, look, I actually think the snow made it more exciting because it is a compact village. The majority of the village was actually filled with people that work on the Olympics or work for the Olympics or are competing or are officials. So when you got to ski, if you got some spare time, you were literally skiing on your own. Like, there was no one there. There was one day I skied and I sang this song. I'm so lonely, so lonely, so lonely. It's one of my most watched reels, because people couldn't believe there was no one there.
Yeah, I remember seeing your social at the time of empty slopes if you were skiing around, which is fantastic. Yep. You mentioned about the snowfall. I recall, I think it was the snowboard cross. I mean, they were going so slowly on heavy snow down there, and I think they'd had already possibly to reschedule it, so they really had to make that event happen on that occasion. I
feel that the border cross course was built slow. It was a slower course. It was definitely not as fast a course as the FIS World Cup events leading up to that. And we actually did run into a guy in one of the bars who was Swiss, and he was an engineer of that course. And he was telling us that, yeah, that was the case.
Yeah. Okay. Some frustration for the athletes there. Unless you're lucky enough to be working for the BBC or TNT, it's evidently very expensive to attend the Winter Olympics. I mean, you were at the Games as an independent journalist, and in the lead up to the Games, the conversation was that accommodation at those venues was in short supply and very expensive. Did you stay in Livigno itself, or did you commute in?
Well, it's all very difficult because, the IOC have a certain number of hotel rooms that they offer to the press and that they hold on to for officials. And you get first dibs at those, but you don't get a discounted rate for that. If you're not working for the national broadcaster, like I'm going on my own, I'm working for my publication, but everyone else was working for publications, so they were being paid, their accommodation was covered. I had to cover mine. It was absolutely pointless being anywhere but downtown Livigno. Like, you had to be in Livigno. If you were down the road halfway between Livigno and Bormio, the issue there was if it snowed, you might not even make it up to Livigno for your event, right? The events that you're supposed to be covering. So I originally got that allocation. I was like, no, that's not going to work for me. And the AOC are absolutely brilliant, because a lot of Australians didn't get what they needed. And they went in and fought for us. And I got it great. I loved where I was staying. I mean, it was a classic old Italian little ski lodge. I'd walk out the door and I was on the pedestrian area. I'd walk out the door and I was like a 5-minute walk to the press centre. I could see the big air from where I was. I loved it. Cost me a freaking fortune, but I loved it.
Cool, that's fantastic. And I mentioned you were there as an independent. How does that fit in alongside athletes and organisations such as the AOC or Team Australia?
Everything changes when you get to an Olympics. Like, everything changes. It's one day every 4 years. And it's not just everything changes because anyone can win on that day, really. If you're in the top 5 to 10, you can win. But also for media, if you're the national broadcaster, you've paid a lot of money to be that national broadcaster. So you get first dibs on everything. For someone like me, I would go and see FIS World Cups. I know the athletes. I report on snow sports throughout the year. When it comes to the Olympics, I pretty much go to the bottom of the food chain. And we're not allowed to film inside a venue. We're not allowed to take photos inside a venue, which is fair enough because these guys have paid big money for this. But in a world of social media, this gets really tough because you've got a crowd of people behind you who are like athlete parents and family members, etc., who are taking photos and are putting them up. And I'm putting them up on social and no one's ripping them down. And I'm just going, oh, my God, I really want to put this up. I really want to put this up. But, look, it's tough, but you find ways around it. We have something called the Icy Knoll where the AOC bring our athletes out of the venue and they put them in front of a microphone and they let us know where they're going to be and when, and we get there. But we're still up against every other media. So you ask a question, it's like an open press conference. You ask a question, everyone gets the answer, right? So if they don't know snow sports the way you do, and you really want an answer to this question, you got to risk it and hope that they edit that bit out because they don't realize that was actually really integral.
And it must be frustrating, as you mentioned, you know a lot of the athletes already. You've interviewed lots of them already, yet you're pushed slightly down the line with other people who have no idea about what's going on ahead of you in the queue.
Oh, thankfully, it's only once every 4 years, really, isn't it? It's just because I do remember saying to a journalist coming in and going, oh, my God, I just went, what was it called, sunrise skiing. So you can go up in the dark in this gondola and you ski down as the sun comes up and you do it a few times and then you end up having this incredible breakfast as part of the experience. So I've come in and I've said, I just had a really great little stress relief this morning. I went for a ski, sunrise. And a journo looked at me and goes, oh, yeah, I don't ski. And I said, oh, well, you can snowboard. Like, you can take your snowboard. Oh, no, I don't snowboard either. And I went, oh. No, I've never seen snow until last week. And I just looked at this person and went, I'm the last person you should be saying that to. Seriously, I can't even look at you right now. I have to walk away. But, in other terms, you do work around it. Like I would grab an athlete because it was so relaxed and it was Italy and, the athletes would be walking down the main street with their medal or whatever. I'd grab them because I know them and say, hey, listen, can I just chat to you quickly on my phone, on the camera? They'd be like, yeah, which is allowed. So I would get these extra little bits that other people wouldn't get because they didn't have the relationships. But, at the end of the day, I was just thrilled to be there, to be honest. Thrilled.
Cool. Well, I mean, that is brilliant. And Australia evidently had a very good games. It was a record 6 medals, I think 3 gold, 2 silver, 1 bronze. Extremely impressive. True, Australia has ski resorts, but like GB, most people don't think of Australia as a winter sports nation. What do you put that success down to?
Well, we've put a lot of money into snow sports at an elite level. So we have the National Snow Sports Training Centre in Jindabyne, and athletes from all around the world come to that. And that's basically dry slope training. It's a massive big air jumps. It's into airbags. We have a water ramp up in Queensland, which was built for the swimmers. I mean, we love swimming here. If it's Summer Olympics, apparently we're really good at it. But in the Winter Olympians, they built a ramp. They built all these ramp sets so that the mogul skiers and the aerialists could go up there and train and jump into the water at the end. They put these special bubbles up so that when they fall into the water, it's not as brutal as it would be. And prior to that, our aerial skiers and mogul skiers, if they were training to do air and jumps, etc., they would do it into a yabby creek, like a yabby dam, a dam filled with muddy water, filled with yabbies. Yabbies are like those tiny little lobsters, but like bogan lobsters really is probably what you call them.
Okay, I've got to check I understand what you're talking about here. You're saying your potential Olympic athletes who are doing a jump into a creek that had lobsters in.
Yeah, pretty much. But little lobsters.
Okay, well, it sounds like
lobsters.
the Jindabyne place sounds like a big upgrade on that.
It is. It really is. And so they had all of that. Plus, they've also, we get more money with every time we get a medal at an Olympic level, the AOC and the government give us more money, which is great. The more medals we get, the more money we get. I don't know what's in the water in Jindabyne at the moment, but Cooper Woods trained in Jindabyne. He's a gold medalist. Matt Graham, he was bronze and silver. He trains in Jindabyne. Josie Baff, who won gold in border cross, you would know her. She's from Jindabyne. Charlotte and Abby Wilson, who are mogul and border cross, Jindabyne. Who else won? Oh, of course, Danielle Scott. She was silver. She's not Jindabyne. She was jumping into Yabby formed creek.
Is Scotty James the only one you haven't mentioned?
Oh my goodness. How could we miss Scotty? There is another one I haven't mentioned though. Oh, Jakara, Anthony, of course. She's Mount Buller. Double gold, Jack. No, Scotty James trains in Australia in August in his own half pipe that he built at Thredbo. Yeah, but we love Scotty. Yeah. And at the Olympics, I'll just tell you just quickly, I did say in the press conference with Scotty, what's it going to take for Thredbo to get a full training half pipe rather than an Olympic-sized half pipe rather than just a shorter one? And he was like, well, it's probably going to take gold, isn't it? And I'm like, will we have an X Games there? So he's like, yep, X Games Thredbo. So we're like looking forward to that.
Cool. Well, we're going to come back to Thredbo later. And, I love your stories from Livigno and the Winter Olympics. But if it's okay, I wondered if I could just take you back in your career a little bit so listeners can find out a little bit more about your journey to this point where you are now the expert on snow sports in Australasia, let's say. Now, I did read that your first dream was to become an actor, but it was in radio where you got your first break in media. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah. Look, I auditioned for all the drama schools in Australia. I eventually got accepted and completely flipped out and freaked out and ran to London rather than doing my 3 years drama school here. Ran to London, did a 4-week course at RADA, convinced myself I was going to audition for that school, never did, ended up working in restaurants with all your famous chefs, eventually came back to Australia and got offered a job as Barry Humphries. Remember Barry Humphries? What was Dame Edna? I got offered a job as his PA on a tour of Asia. Yeah, I talked myself into it. I don't know how, but I did. And
I can imagine how.
I was just a temp. Like I'd done a 4-week course at South Kensington Secretarial College to learn to touch type. And so when I got back to Australia, I was just working as a temp and I ended up a temp with Barry. Anyway, I didn't take that job because I also got offered a job as national publicist for Sony, which is how I ended up in radio. I started publicising all of the big bands that would come to Australia on tour. And then I got offered a job in radio by one of the radio guys I used to pitch to.
Nice. And from radio, you moved on to the lifestyle channel at Foxtel?
Yeah. Yeah, so I was doing the Hot 30 countdown. I was queen of the teens, really. So we'd have quite a lot of fun. And then Foxtel, which was our first cable network in Australia, they approached me and asked if I would work with them on air as their one of their founding 5 on-air talent. And I hadn't really done TV before, so I was like, sure, why not? So I did that and then did that for a while. Yeah, and then I wrote a book.
Interesting you mentioned that because it was around that time you became a published author. In 2000, you published the book Good Girls Do Swallow. Great title, very amusing. The subject matter itself is a bit more serious than that. I wondered if you wanted to explain what.
Sure. Look, originally I pitched that book to Random House, who ended up being my publishers, Random House Penguin, as Leave the Light On in the Fridge. Then we changed the title to Good Girls Do Swallow, mainly for shock value at the time, I think, but also because the book is an autobiography about disordered eating and eating disorders. And it's a very personal story. It's not a 12-step, here's how you get better. It's very much my story of what happened for me in the world of eating disorders as a child and a teenager, and how society supports eating disorders when that shouldn't, and what it contributes and your relationships with your family and friends. And I decided that I think that humour is a really great way to get a message across because people are not defensive. They're leaning in when they're laughing. They're not leaning out. So we did it in a Blackley comic style, I mean, I had friends that read the book who rang me in tears, but they knew me. So, yeah, I was really very, very fortunate that I got offered a book deal with my first book, and it was a bestseller here in Australia. And for me, what was amazing about it was the difference it made to some people's lives, because I couldn't find a book that would help me, that I could read, that was an Australian story that made me go, oh my God, I'm not alone. So I went and wrote it. And then we took it to the Lifestyle Channel at Foxtel and said, do you want TV option rights on this? And would you like to do a documentary based on this? And they bought the TV rights and then said, okay, you can produce, present and write the doco. I'm like, I haven't done that before. All right, okay. So they gave me a really fantastic director and producer, Anna Bateman, who has just won every award known to man. And she's just done so many great docos here. And we did a TV special.
I think that's fantastic. Firstly about your honesty there, but also I think it demonstrates your creativity as well. We mentioned, I mentioned in the intro, all the different areas that you have been successful in. I mean, that was your first book. You've also published a second book as well, title being Anything She Can Do, I Can Do Better. What was that one about?
Well, that came about because on my book tour around Australia, all of the journos asked, they read the book and they all jumped on the fact that in the book, I talk very openly about competition and about the feelings of competition between women in particular. And at that time, that was quite a taboo topic. So I said to Random House, do you think we should do a book on this and demystify it and turn women competing with each other from destructive to constructive? Because most people go, stop competing. It's like, well, no, it's part of life. We all compete. It's how we get ahead, or it's how we survive if you want to go to a primal position. So they said yes. And then I said, okay, well, I need to interview women, successful women from around the world, basically so I can go traveling on this book. So I went to London and I interviewed a ton of people in London, and I interviewed people in New York and in Sydney, and all successful women about their experiences of female competition. Now, we interviewed 55 people. Of those 55 women, 49 of them agreed to have what we had chosen from their interview to go in the book. The other 6 said, I never said any of that, right? Never said that. I'm like, well, it's a direct transcript of a tape, but okay, we've given you the grace to say yes or no. And if you don't want to be in it, that's not a problem, we'll pull it. But you can't deny, transcripts of tapes.
Fantastic. Well, I'll put links to both of those books in the show notes. You saw that your career is moved from being a broadcaster and segueing into writing and segueing into journalism. You've written for publications including the Sydney Morning Herald, The Age, WA Today, Brisbane Times, Canberra Times. Am I right to say that you started as a travel writer but ended up becoming a ski specialist?
Yeah. In the writing world, yes. I actually started as a women's issues writer for women's magazines and newspapers, etc. And that's when I was doing my 2 books. Then I ended up skiing with the Prime Minister of New Zealand, bizarrely, because I'd never skied before, right? I had not skied before, and I got offered this trip.
And your first time skiing was with the Prime Minister of New Zealand?
Kind of. Yeah, I guess I could say it like that. I actually was given a private instructor in Queenstown. I was on a travel trip, that junket, you'd probably call it. So off I was in Queenstown, and they gave me a private instructor for 2 days. And the private instructor was really good. He was telling me how great I was, and I believed him. And I thought, fantastic. I'm obviously a really good natural skier. So then I met the CEO of Destination Queenstown at a dinner, and he said, do you ski? And I said, yeah, according to my ski instructor, I'm really good. And he was like, great. Do you want to come skiing with the Prime Minister of New Zealand tomorrow? She's going to be here opening a chairlift at Cardrona. And I said, well, can she ski? And he was like, yes. It's all right, I'll come. So they were all excited because they drove me up the next day, and they were really excited because they were talking about there being international press at this event. And I thought, great, I'm going to be able to sell a story to the New York Times or whatever. They were talking about me. I said, I'm from Australia. I'm not international press. Anyway, all I had to do, if you've ever skied in Cardrona, there is this little cat track. It's not that little. It's quite wide, actually. A cat track just down from the base lodge down to is it the White Star Express that she was opening? Can't remember. Anyway, all I had to do was just ski down that, then get onto the wider Grim Slope, get down to the chairlift, cut the red ribbon, or she cuts the red ribbon. I go up the chair with her, ski down with her. I couldn't ski the cat track, couldn't do it. I honestly, it was like an Alaska spine to me. I didn't know what I was doing. I fell and tumbled, and by the time, and they were all laughing, by the time I got to the chairlift, she'd cut the red ribbon, got on the chair, gone to the top, skied down, got on the helicopter and gone.
At least you did have an international journalist there eventually. So that got you hooked, that trip there. But you ended up writing for, becoming more of a ski specialist in terms of 100%. The journalism.
Well, I just realised I really liked it, and that I was humiliated by, top level government in New Zealand. So it was really important that I go in and bat for Australia. So I told them all that I would be coming back that season and skiing every run they could see. But I didn't know how I was going to do it. So I came home and I had, 7 days of private. I actually ended up with 250 hours of private instruction in 2 or 3 years. Now, how can I afford that? I can't. So I go to my editors at the newspaper and tell them we need to have a column on skiing and snowboarding. It's a massive amount of people that do it from Australia. It's huge. You'll have so much advertising. And I'll get to get all of my private instruction done. And we ended up with a column every week for 10 years on skiing and snowboarding in the Sydney Morning Herald and the Age as a result.
Fantastic. And was that where your moniker Miss Know-It-All started?
Yes. So I went to News Limited and Fairfax and pitched both of them. They're the two here. It's like Rupert Murdoch, and it used to be Kerry Packer. Now everything's changed. Because it was at the time when print was moving into digital and no one was really doing digital well as a newspaper, and they started with bloggers. And so I pitched this Know-It-All column to both of them, and they both wanted it, but I went with Fairfax and we called it Miss Know-It-All. And
that's when you started to explore skiing in even more detail and get a lot of trips under your belt. Yeah. And, I mentioned earlier, you're best known, I guess pun intended, for the Snowsports website snowsbest.com. Mm-hmm. You founded that in 2014. What prompted that decision?
Well, I couldn't go to Sochi. My mother had got cancer, terminal cancer. So I just didn't, and it was my first foray into mortality within my family. So I decided to stay in Sydney and report on the Sochi Olympics from home, which I did. And I did it on a WordPress site called miss-knowitall.com. A lot of the stuff we did started going viral. Something we did on Jossie Wells, I think it was, went viral. And people started ringing, people rang me and said, can we put some ads on your site? I'm like, this is just a little old WordPress blog I've had for years that I never write on. Sure, go for it. And then what happened was there was a bit of a kerfuffle over who owned Miss Know-It-All, the term Miss Know-It-All. So I changed my WordPress site to snowsbest.com and turned it into an actual newspaper magazine style website. And then I trademarked Miss Know-It-All. So there was no confusion as to who actually owned that.
Nicely done.
Yeah.
Was it a full-time project from the start? It sounds like it wasn't. It was a part-time sort of thing, and then it grew into full-time.
It just got bigger and bigger because we didn't have anything. Australians, you can't go to a ski resort anywhere in the world without hearing an Australian accent somewhere. So we're big skiers and we're big travellers, and we're a big market for people like Utah and Colorado and British Columbia and Japan, and many, many more are coming to Europe now than before. There's a great wave and trend towards Europe from Australia for skiing and snowboarding. We have the snow travel expos that happen in Sydney and Melbourne here. All of the resorts use those dates in May as the window of 2 to 3 weeks that they'll be in Australia and New Zealand to sell their resorts to the wholesalers to get their packages out there as well. So we covered it. We really, we're wanted around the world. We might not be wanted by other skiers and snowboarders that are with us, but we're definitely wanted by the resorts. So it just made commercial sense to me as somebody who was passionate about skiing and snowboarding. I'd love to think it was a commercial business decision, but that's just, profit loss. What the hell's that? I've got no freaking clue half the time. And it's not like you make a ton of money in the world of ski. So we're just covering basically anything that was news with Australia and New Zealand, anything new to do with the resorts. And then for the northern season, we were very much a snow travel site. It was be where you would go to hear what was happening in the Australian resorts and Kiwi resorts, but also to talk and discuss and get some information on where you would go skiing north of the equator.
Cool. Well, I mean, there's a huge amount of information on there, and I find myself looking at it on a regular basis, not just for information about Australasian resorts, but all sorts of information. And, now that's developed, you also publish your own podcasts, you run webinars for the industry. That's all under the Snow's Best banner, right?
We work with destinations to do webinars for consumers, people that can't get to a snow travel expo. There's plenty of them all around Australia. They still get access to these resorts. They just get it in a webinar with just one resort. So Revelstoke, we did a Revelstoke one, and Revelstoke gave away 3-day lift passes to every single person that came in the webinar. So you can imagine how many people jumped into that webinar. A lot. And we do podcasts. Before the Olympics, we did It Takes a Village, all about the different people that are behind the scenes. Before that, we did it on emotions and the emotions that you feel on the mountains and why you feel that way.
Yeah, well, you're clearly a very busy, hardworking person. I'm particularly interested in a couple of other projects that you've been involved with. I was reading about the Women of Winter Snow Australia group. What are you looking to achieve there?
Well, Snow Australia is government-funded pathway organisation in Australia to get winter athletes to FIS World Cup level and then to Olympic level through the Olympic Winter Institute of Australia. The ski industry in Australia has a long time been a boys' club at a very high level. We've had a couple of women at high level. In terms of resorts, we had Belinda Trembath, who was the GM of Hotham for 20 odd years or however long, and then went off to Perisher for a season. But she's now at Whistler. I just had lunch with her in Whistler, and she's taken over Whistler Blackcomb. Good on her. And then we had Tina Burford, who was at Hotham. She's been poached by Park City. So a lot of girls, I'm sure you'll probably find it the same way in Britain, they tend to fall out of competition around terrain parks at a certain age, or they're not sure what their pathway is if they wanted to work within the ski industry. Like, what pathways are there? Not being an athlete, like, how would I become a marketer? How would I become a GM? How would I run a tourism operation? Snow Australia's Women of Winter Working Group, there's a group of us, we're all volunteers, and we do 4 to 5 events a year. And each of those events is a networking event, and we do it with New South Wales with APSI, which is the women's ski instructor group. And we get people to talk about how they got to where they are and what they're doing, and we interview them and have a great time.
Cool. I mean, it sounds absolutely fantastic. Really interested to hear about that. I mean, while we're on that topic then, you've built a very successful career in snow sports. I wonder what advice you would offer to women, or indeed anyone, wanting to get into ski journalism.
Oh, gosh. Does it even exist anymore? I feel like you have to be an influencer, don't you? I feel like you just have to create content. But there is a move back towards longer form journalism. I feel longer form writing, there is that. There are some people in the New York Times have done some fantastic long form journalism around, avalanches and all sorts of, I think they did the one on the California avalanche as well. That it's the problem is retention. We're all looking at devices all day long. You don't get them in 3 seconds, you're kind of screwed. You've got to keep going and find another way to get them in. If you want to be a ski journalist, well, first of all, I would suggest you don't do it the hard way like I did. I would suggest you go learn to ski now and know how to ski, right? Suggest you do that and start your own channels, because that's probably where you're going to get the most traction. Substack, it's all about Substack now. Create a Substack. I mean, there's a guy down here called Snowstack, Tyson Miller, who does fantastic stuff on Substack because he's obsessed by weather and snow forecasting. So we follow his and we put it up across our social and stuff because it's great and it's informative. Find a niche within the ski and snow world that no one else is doing and follow that.
Yeah, I think that is really good advice. I'm so impressed by your energy. You're very good at making things happen. Another project I feel I should mention is Snow Aid Australia. You set it up in 2020 to raise funds for bushfire relief. That ended up raising over 200,000 Australian dollars, I think, for bushfire and wildlife charities. Do you want to tell us a bit about how you made that happen in a very short period of time?
Well, I always get a little teary when I talk about the Snow Aid auction because it was really a testimony to the bond of community that skiers and snowboarders have. And when they get together, what we can do together is phenomenal. We had, as you know, horrendous bushfires in December and January 2020. One of our ski resorts, Selwyn, actually got burnt down. Video footage and photos went all around the world of the horrific wildlife situation and how many koalas and kangaroos and echidnas and all sorts of native wildlife died in those fires. So, I didn't know COVID was going to come off the end of this. If I did, I probably wouldn't have done it, but because that was really exhausting. I approached all of our clients and every single resort I've ever been to in my life and any outerwear company and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a 10-day live auction online and we're going to raise funds for bushfire relief and we're going to split it. We're going to give money to national, we're going to give money to state, and we're going to give money to alpine regions. And people threw prizes at us. Like, here's a $10,000 trip to Aspen. Here's an Olympic jacket signed by, I don't know, Michaela Schifrin. It wasn't her, but, that kind of thing. The prizes were off the charts. And everyone just dug deep. And it took us 6 weeks to pull it together. And we did it. And we got it there. And I had some volunteers help me. And we got it up there and we got it happening. And in 10 days, we raised $230,000. And that was because of the global ski community and the Australian ski community. And that's what it was. And I was so proud of everybody, so proud.
Cool. Well, it was because of that community. And I think, as you say, it demonstrates it. But for these things to happen, they need to have someone who has got the energy and the connections and the will to make it happen. And that was you. So, belated congratulations on that one.
That's very kind of you, Ian. I am one of those people who later in life discovered that they have ADHD. So that may actually have a lot to do with it because I'll hyper-focus on something. I don't know anyone that would have been able to get the auction up off the ground if they didn't have ADHD because you literally hyper-focus and then it's done and you're on to the next thing.
Well, I love it. Now, we mentioned that snowsbest.com covers all the latest news about skiing in Australia and New Zealand. And the start of the season is coming up very shortly in the Southern Hemisphere. So I wondered if I could ask you a few questions about that. Now, here in the UK, in the autumn, we have events that start off the season. We have a B2B event called Listex, so the B2C event, the London Snow Show. Now, you've already referred a couple of times, I think, to the Snow Travel Expo season. You've just had the Melbourne event. You've got Sydney to come. What are they like? Are they for trade or are they for consumers?
Oh, no, they're consumer. So the trade stuff, I was up in Brisbane last week at a couple of trade events. Well, they just, as you know, they have completely separate events. The Snow Travel Expo in Sydney and Melbourne, they're consumer ones. There is one that Travel Plan do on a Thursday night this week, well, whatever week we're chatting. They also do one, and that gets absolutely packed as well. That's consumer. There isn't a consumer one in Brisbane, and people in Brisbane are really not happy about that. Yeah, so that's why we do our webinars and try to get the Queensland people in. But the Snow Travel Expo is kind of like, the season's coming up. The season's around the corner when the Snow Travel Expo happens. And it's not dissimilar to the London show. Phil, who runs and owns the Snow Travel Expo, him and I actually went to the London show, maybe 15 years ago, together at the same time. And he does a great job. It really is fantastic.
Everyone's getting in the mood for the season now. Hopefully, I'm not going to spoil that mood because I am going to mention climate change. I think last year was a very good season for snow in Australia, but the long-term trend is for shorter seasons and fewer snow days. How much of a threat do you think climate change could be to the Australasian snow sport industry?
Well, a huge threat like it is all around the world. We go for extremes. You look at Utah and Colorado last season, not very much snow at all. And then next season they could have like extreme storms that just go crazy and it will be the best powder winter of your ski life. But that doesn't mean that climate change isn't happening. In Australia, a lot of the ski resorts they've got the Snowfactory. You know the Snowfactory? Coronet Peak has that in New Zealand now as well. And Thredbo have like peaks and peaks and mountains of snow already made.
Yeah, interesting you should mention the Snowfactory because that was on my list of other questions to ask you. I think both Thredbo and Coronet Peak have introduced those this year. If listeners are not familiar with the concept, it is a big difference from regular snow cannons. Usually you need to have temperatures at or close to freezing, and then you fire out water at high pressure, it freezes and falls as snow. But with the Snowfactory, the snow is made internally. And that means you can make snow in much higher temperatures. Now, I kind of have mixed feelings about this because, I fully understand that, ski resorts support thousands of jobs, either directly or indirectly. But it's a lot more carbon intensive way of creating snow if nature isn't playing ball. You got any thoughts on that?
Well, it's kind of like a Tesla, isn't it? It's, you can't recycle those batteries, and how much water does it take to create a Tesla? So I kind of feel like we're 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back consistently in the world of sustainability and climate change. The resorts here, they are all doing around the world, obviously, compensating for any extra carbon that they're creating with other sustainable experience.
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, I think to be fair to Thredbo, they get all of their electricity from renewable sources via hydro. But it is a change. Let's take a more positive note. Last year, we saw a huge expansion of terrain at Cardrona in New Zealand. Are there any other major developments, Australasian resorts we should be aware of for this winter?
Gosh, last year was quite exciting, wasn't it? I'm looking forward to actually skiing that major terrain at Cardrona this season, because I didn't get to ski it last year because of I had a knee operation, but also they couldn't open it for quite a while because they didn't have a fantastic season till the end. What's happening down under, particularly in New Zealand, is the seasons are going later. And if you look at Mammoth right now, they've just opened till later. Colorado suddenly got a whole ton of snow. I feel like the seasons are shifting along. In terms of, Perisher had a brand new chairlift last year, which was huge. Charlotte Pass has a new chair. Actually, it's an old chair. It's the Guthrie's old chair. It's a double chair that they're moving over to where there was a pommer, so that now you can go up higher, so you can access more terrain.
Can I ask you about another new development? This isn't actually at a resort, but theoretically it's going to be in Melbourne. And very possibly the concept will extend around the world. I'm talking about Snowtunnel. It's a new idea from an Australian company. So I've got a 2-part question for you about this. Firstly,
go for it.
Can you explain to listeners what we're talking about? And secondly, do you think it's ever going to happen?
It's such a good question, isn't it? Both of them. First of all, what it is it's a tunnel, kind of like a rat cage when a rat goes round and round and round a wheel, right? But you can actually, but it's longer. It's kind of like a half pipe, 2 half pipes put together, one on top of the other. That's a better way to put it, right? So 2 half pipes, one on top of the other. It's man-made, and you can have a number of boarders or skiers in there at once, and it just rotates and rotates and rotates, and you just keep skiing and skiing and skiing, or snowboarding and snowboarding and snowboarding, apparently.
I think most people, Rachel, probably would have said a hamster rather than a rat.
Oh, yeah, good point.
but
those guys
it is an interesting idea. Right, and it's kind of based on, surfing models. So there are various surf centres where they kind of developed this idea from, right?
Yeah, well, the guys that have set it up, there's a bit of a running joke down under. There's an indoor snow place that's supposed to open in Penrith, right? And it's been talked about for 10 years, and they're still putting ads on Meta about it. It hasn't opened yet, right? Snowtunnel's doing the same, and there's this race. Who's actually going to open the door first? Is there going to be a door that opens? So Snowtunnel made all of these announcements recently. Then they went out and asked for investors. Now they want you to invest in it, right? And they're saying, okay, it's just like urban surf. But it's not like urban surf, because everyone that surfs can surf for free already. It costs to go snowboarding and skiing. It doesn't cost to jump in an ocean and surf, right? There's a lot more people that do surf. It's basically wave machines, right? They create waves. I personally don't feel skiing in a tunnel is going to be anything like skiing terrain of Jackson Hole.
I think you're probably right. I don't think that's a stretch to say that.
They're not saying that's what it is.
Hey, look,
they're not saying that.
I'll put a link in the show notes so listeners can get a better idea of what we're talking about. Okay, finally, I've got one more question for you. We mentioned Australia had their most successful Winter Olympics ever. Do you think the country is going to see a post-Olympics bump in interest and in attendance at resorts this winter?
I feel that the vibe is high amongst skiers and snowboarders. The vibe is high because we've come off the back of the Olympics, and it was so exciting. Everyone watched it. Everyone knows who won. Everyone just felt this renewed vigor for skiing and snowboarding. Will it bring new skiers and snowboarders in? I don't know. Vale Resorts in Australia have launched a beginner bundle, which is interesting. The problem we have in the ski industry worldwide is retaining them, getting them to come back, Like beginners will come, they'll try it out, but how do you get them to come back? How do you get them to fall in love with the culture? How do you get them to see it as a must-do every year? It's a challenge, particularly with the cost of living crisis at the moment. We just need snow, though. If we don't have a lot of snow, there won't be excitement.
For sure. That is always a thing. I mean, this is a challenge that the industry has had to deal with on a regular basis. But, I like that idea of bringing new people into the resort. Well, that is brilliant, Rachael. I really do appreciate you sharing all of your knowledge with us. I have so much respect for the amount of time and effort you put into your various projects. You skied in Europe this winter. I know there are so many places in the world. You're going to be going back to Whistler. Aussies are more likely to go to Japan or the States. Might we see you in Europe again, perhaps 100%. Before the next Olympics in 2030?
100%. No, 26, 27 is my Euro era. Forget Euro summer. I'm doing Euro winter. I am definitely, I want to go to Zermatt. I want to go to Val Thorens, and I want to do the Dolomites. I got so hooked on Euro skiing again just by going to Livigno that, you'll see me there this winter. In fact, we might get some turns together.
Cool. Well, that would be fantastic, Rachael. And I'd recommend all those 3 resorts that you mentioned. And if I can help at all, I certainly will. Well, if it's okay with you, we're going to move towards a close now. Sure. I love getting feedback from our listeners. Let me know what you've enjoyed, or if you have ideas for future features. You can leave a comment on Spotify, Instagram, or Facebook. Our handle is @SkiPodcast, or you can drop me an email to theskipodcast@gmail.com. We're also on WhatsApp. I release exclusive material ahead of each episode there, so look in the show notes for that link. One bit of feedback since the last episode, Mike Greenland. He said, listen for years, always excellent. And he very kindly bought me a coffee. And if, like Mike, you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, you're very welcome to buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/the Ski Podcast. There are now 312 episodes of the Ski Podcast to catch up with. I had a look at the stats this morning. 236 of those were listened to in the last week alone. So maybe that's you, listener, trying to get through the northern summer before your next trip to the snow. We have over 300 episodes in our back catalogue, all available at skipodcast.com. So just have a search through the tags and categories. You're bound to find something of interest. Now, looking around the stats, I can see the Ski Podcast is listened to around the world. Most of our listeners are in the UK, but I saw in the last week, 4% were in Australia and 1.5% were in New Zealand. So maybe that will be different for this episode when it goes live. That's it for this week. I'm delighted to let you know that we're going back to weekly episodes over the next 2 months, starting with a special episode all about Chamonix. Regular listeners will know I've just got back from a 2-month stay there. And in next week's episode, I'm going to try and explain what it is that makes it such a special destination. You're not going to want to miss this one. So make sure you subscribe and follow us now. Right, for now, I would like to thank my very special guest today, Rachael Oakes-Ash. Thank you for your time, Rachael.
And it's always such a pleasure to chat with you. And I'm really humbled that you invited me on just to speak on my own. Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure talking with you. Finally, listener, thank you for joining us wherever in the world you're listening right now. And until next time, goodbye.